Save Our Sons, a call to recognise the humanity of boys and men. Good morning. My name is John Gormley. I'm an MRA, which means Men's Human Rights Activist. The H is silent. I'm part of a group of people who are called Men's Human Rights Ireland. Our goal is to fight for the rights of boys and men across Ireland as part of a larger global movement called the Men's Human Rights Movement. We'd like to improve the laws which discriminate against boys and men and make them more gender neutral so they don't discriminate against anyone regardless of their gender. I'm a husband to an intelligent, loving wife and father to a wonderful, clever, strong young boy. He's the reason I'm here today. I want the world to be fair to him and to all people regardless of gender. Paul Elam, who spoke minutes ago, is part of our movement. I'd like to take this opportunity to offer thanks and to acknowledge the work Paul Elam has done with his website and thank him personally for his help in setting up a new website called whiteribbon.org, which is a campaign to stop all violence regardless of gender. You may be wondering why it is that a group from the Republic of Ireland is up here making a speech in lovely Belfast on International Men's Day 2014. We were invited by Men's Rights Northern Ireland. We had extreme difficulty finding any events funded by taxpayers in the Republic. However, we did find most of them had events for International Women's Day. Now, the song called No Man's Land, which is better known as Green Fields of France, written by Eric Bogle in 1976, is about war and the futility of it all and how men are disposable in society. There's a line in that song which struck hard and cold at me when I was writing this speech for you all here today. I'd like to read it to you now. But here in this graveyard, it's still no man's land. The countless white crosses mute witness stand, and to man's blind indifference to his fellow man, to a whole generation that was butchered and damned. Man's blind indifference to his fellow man is why we're here today. Why the Irish government has not funded a single event for International Men's Day 2014. The rate of male suicides continues to climb every year. Little is done about it other than to suggest we limit sales of alcohol. Men should change, or men need to change need to talk about their problems. There's so many obvious signs men are being discriminated against. Men do the most dangerous jobs in the world. 90% of workplace deaths are from men trying to provide for their families. Separated fathers, 99% certain of losing their children just by them walking through the family law courts. Men have no service in Ireland for when they're suffering domestic abuse other than one that will take phone calls off them and maybe accompany them to court. We would like to pass credit on to Men's Aid Northern Ireland for trying to change that here in Northern Ireland, and to Peter Robinson and DUP for taking interest in this obvious injustice. In the Republic of Ireland, the only service available for half the victims of domestic abuse is one that takes phone calls and accompanies men to court, as I said. There are no shelters for them and their children when they suffer domestic abuse. When they suffer domestic abuse, they're more likely to end up on the street or living in their car than to get help from the Irish government. Their help they get is to end up on an abuser program, whether or not they've abused their spouse. This is because they are male. But of course, it was not always like that. Until relatively recently, there was more regard for people as people rather than putting emphasis on one gender or the other. Men made up the majority of the workforce, not just because it was hard manual labour, but because there was a real need to have a full-time stay-at-home mother. Everyone contributed to their family and was protected by the family. With the mass production of white goods and hoovers, however, housework could be done easily and quickly, and the workplace was moved to less and less manual labour. Increasingly, wealth has expanded our choice of lifestyle, work and entertainment. In ways it's a good thing, other ways leaves much to be desired. People were happiest in those warm extended families, which are a rule rather than the exception in many parts of the world. So why is the situation of men, those men who in the vast majority conceived of and engineered and built and distributed the wonders which make our modern world possible, why is that situation deteriorating so badly? This is a big question everyone should be asking, not just activists like us, especially today. The big questions have big complicated answers which in part must be laid at the feet of political and social narrative of the vision which has been promoted by certain groups in academia, media and political parties. I was at an event recently hosted by Senator Mary White of the Fianna Fáil party in Sandyford in County Dublin. I left that event feeling very angry. According to her, alcohol is one of the reasons that people, especially men, kill themselves. 93% of suicide victims have alcohol in their system, so obviously suicide is caused by alcohol. Alcohol is either a symptom or a cause. The Centre suggests we limit sales of alcohol so as to help stop suicide. Two of the worst days for men kill themselves are Father's Day and Christmas Day. Should they be banned in order to help stop suicide? Perhaps we should prohibit the sale of rope to stop boys and men hanging themselves that way too, which happens to be the one way that boys and men seem to do it most of the time. Since drowning is a possibility, should we prohibit water as well? When society is toxic and obviously against you, you will turn to anything, something to help you escape the reality of where it is you are. Alcohol and drugs are two of those things that people use to escape their reality. They are not the problem. It is society that's the problem and how it treats boys, men and masculinity. How many more mothers must cry for their dead sons before we learn that boys and men have humanity, and that humanity must be respected? Reading Senator Mary White's document, which she wrote in 2008, makes chilling reading for me as a men's rights activist. She admires a man called Professor Anthony Clare. Here are some of his words. The whole issue of man, the point of men, their purpose, their value, their justification is a matter for public debate. Serious commentators declare that men are redundant, that women do not need them, and children will better off without them. At the beginning of the 21st century, it's difficult to avoid a conclusion that men are in serious trouble. Throughout the world, developed and developing, antisocial behaviour is essentially male. Violence, sexual abuse of children, illicit drug use, alcohol misuse, gambling are all overwhelmingly male activities. The courts and prisons bulge with men. When it comes to aggression, delinquent behaviour, risk-taking, social mayhem, men win gold. Yet for all their behaving badly, they do not seem any the happier. Throughout North America, Europe and Australia, male suicides outnumber female by a factor of 3 and 4 to 1. The rise in the number of young men kill themselves in much of the developed world has been rightly termed an epidemic. Despite the fact that men still outnumber women in positions of power across the globe, still glower down through the glass ceiling, still strut the cabinet tables and boardrooms in every developed country in the world. Men, according to some people, have privilege. Now I'm a 50-year-old straight white male in Ireland. The majority of CEOs are straight white males, around about the age of 50-ish, thereabouts. So I applied to several companies in recent weeks applying for CEO positions. They were rejected. Apparently you need to have more than just male genitalia to become a CEO. Who knew? Here's some more of what the senior psychiatrist stated. My father's generation prided themselves on being providers for their spouses, families and themselves. Today, providing seems no longer required. Married women increasingly reap the benefit of education, harness their intelligence, generate their own incomes. In one-parent families, women press hard for workplace creches and better childcare facilities, as well as social security payments to compensate for male-generated finances. Who's going to pay taxes for those male-generated finances that they want to claim off the state? And we carry on. Not merely is the role of provider under siege, but the role of father is also threatened. The second millennium has ended man's claim to a significant role in procreation, and child rearing is seriously diminished. The rise in the number of single mothers suggests that not merely inadequate as partners and father, but they are simply redundant. Women are certain they can conceive and rear children on their own. They don't need men to father their children. What are they going to use as sperm? They do need men. The development of assisted reproduction, including techniques such as vitro fertilization, artificial insemination by anonymous donor, surrogate motherhood, together with the highly political and controversial assertion that single parenting is as good as that provided by two parents, raise the question, whether fatherhood. Considering 80% of inmates in prisons are the sons of single mothers, I'll take all of that with a pinch of salt. It's very clear psychiatrists don't have any regard for boys or men. As part of our Save Our Sons campaign 2014, we went on the streets of Dún Laoghaire, near where I live, to speak to people who just might care about men more than health professionals or academia or political parties on the issue of male suicide. It's women we spoke to. It was heartbreaking to hear the things they had to tell us. They were all aware society discriminates against boys and men. Just ask any ordinary women on the street. They'll all tell you the same thing. Ask in shops or on the street. It doesn't matter. They all say to you, men have the dirty end of the stick. It's men who are discriminated against. They all know. Perhaps something they kept on saying to us that men need to talk. I had a traumatic experience over 20 years ago. It was really hurtful. I was crying, very, very upset. I tried to tell two close friends of mine. Both of them practically, they didn't want to know. People do not care what men feel unless it is good stuff. They don't want to hear men in pain. It does not suit them or anybody for that matter. In Ireland, there was two suicide support and information system reports commissioned by the National Suicide Research Foundation. These are for the years 2012 and 2013. On page 8 of 2012 report, you can see that one of the key outcomes of the research says the majority of the deceased, 67%, have been in contact with their GP or mental health service in the year prior to death. And of those who had contacted their GP had done so 4 times or more. Men do talk, but no one's listening to them. We in the men's human rights movement believe that men are human beings with feelings, emotions and love, which is why we reject this whole notion that men have this privilege. We reject the notion that men have outlived their purpose. We believe men should be treated with humanity and to recognise men's humanity. We are human beings. We are men. Look around this room now. Walls built by men, floors laid by men, seats made and constructed by men. Even this podium I'm at was made by men. Electricity use, power, all the tools came from the work of men. The food they and the concerned their families consumed was produced by farmers who are predominantly men. The waste which will be removed from this room today, when we are finished, will be removed by men. Any of you drinking water that was sourced and processed by men. Men are needed. Problem is they're not given the respect they richly deserve. The Irish Minister for Education, Rory Quinn, said in 2014 that education was being feminised. He's correct. That helps explain so many boys and men do not feel welcome in schools and colleges. Needless to say, he was criticised for this. It also applies courses for counsellors, social workers, psychiatrists, as we've seen from Professor Anthony Clare from Trinity College. Boys have been failed by the education system and methods used to teach boys not up to scratch. Males are now 39% of graduates from college compared to a decade ago when numbers were roughly 50-50. This percentage is dropping all the time. There are no men's studies programs on colleges show people that men are not monsters and masculinity is not an illness nor a disease or something to be fixed. There's no National Men's Council to lobby for the needs of boys and men. Men and women are different. We talk in different ways. When we call a suicide helpline, we've almost no chance of hearing a man answer the phone. If you want to help someone, understanding where they're coming from helps a great deal to empathise. Believing they are privileged or have advantages over you because of their gender will not endear them to you. The male perspective has been ignored in health and education in the last 50 years. If you want to stem the tide of suicide for our loved ones, you need to change how they are dealt with and how they are heard. So we in Men's Human Rights Ireland have decided to set up our own charity with a view to a male suicide helpline which will be staffed and answered by men. As such, as can be seen, problems facing men and boys not simply in Ireland or Northern Ireland but across the developed world and beyond, and that there is organised resistance and recognition of these very real problems which are taking a heavy toll in human misery and human lives every single day. A toll not inflicted on men but on the women who love them, their wives, their mothers, their grandmothers, daughters, sisters, lovers and friends. More and more men are looking at one another across borders and seeing they have more in common with one another than otherwise. More and more we find we have the same problems. We can work together for a solution, not just among men but among women who recognise these problems and who love men. While some would profit from creating division and strife between the sexes, the men's human rights movement aims to heal those divisions and help men and women of all races, colours, creeds and nationalities to work towards that end, because at the end of the day, we're all people. Thank you for having me here. I'm both proud and humbled to be able to address this audience. Thank you.